said I dance now at every chance.
Cousteau's an enthralling man. I mean, he really is.
They both are.
All
It's a
of
fascinating show.
both Cousteau's.
And if a guy did something, he had to do it on the sneak. I got so tired of sneaking around just to have dinner with someone that you thought was attractive.
Did Sammy Davis Jr. die with a terrible secret? What was he hiding? Sammy was one of the most famous entertainers of all time. He could sing, dance, and act. But behind his smile, was he keeping something dark?
We went, he took me, she got my sister, and Ramona.
People say he knew secrets about Hollywood, powerful people, and even the mafia. Was he scared to talk? Did he take the truth to his grave? Let's find out.
My mother and father separated when I was a kid. And we went, he took me, she got my sister.
Sammy Davis Jr. was born into a world that did not always accept him. He was born in Harlem to two parents who were performers. His father was black and his mother was Cuban American. From a young age, his mother made hurtful comments about his dark skin. This left him feeling unwanted. When he was just 3 years old, he started performing with his father and his father's friend, Will Maston. By 4, he was dancing and singing on stage. He learned early that entertaining people made them forget about his skin color. He thought if he could make people laugh and smile, they would accept him.
So,
Oh my Lord. Is your mother alive?
yes, and my father.
What's-
I come from good lineage.
As he got older, he traveled and performed with the Will Maston Trio. He was very talented, and people loved to watch him sing and dance. But in 1943, when he was drafted into the Army, he faced terrible racism. When Sammy Davis Jr. was drafted into the Army, he had no idea how much it would change his life. Before this, he had been performing in a trio with his father and uncle. They had protected him from the harsh realities of racism. They told him that if people treated them badly, it was just jealousy because of their amazing talent. But when he joined the Army, he had to face racism head on, and it was brutal.
In show business, and I was having fun, and first thing that goes wrong as an adult,
You blame.
you blame them.
Davis was placed in one of the first racially mixed units in the Army. This might sound like progress, but in the 1940s, a black man in an integrated unit was not going to have an easy time. Many white soldiers hated seeing him there. They didn't want to accept him as their equal. Sammy was not the kind of person to just take this abuse. He fought back. Almost every day, he had to fight white soldiers who treated him badly. One time, he was simply talking to a white female secretary when a group of white soldiers saw him. Later, they cornered him, dragged him outside, beat him up, stripped him, and painted him white. They told him that if he wanted to talk to white women, he must want to be white himself. This was not the only time he was attacked. His nose was broken several times, leaving it permanently flattened. Another time, some soldiers gave him a beer that was laced with urine. No matter what they did to him, Sammy refused to back down. He fought with his fists when he had to, but over time he realized something. No matter how many fights he won, the racism never stopped. It just kept coming.
Now, there isn't anything that I would want to change. Not knowing at the time that I was going to get to this point, boy, did I want to change it the next day or the next month.
That's when he made a decision. He would stop fighting with his fists and start fighting with his talent. He knew he had something special. He could dance, he could sing, and he could do impressions of famous people like no one else. If people would not respect him as a man, they would respect him as a performer. After leaving the Army, he rejoined the Will Maston Trio. But this time, he didn't just dance. He also started singing and doing impressions. He worked harder than ever before. Soon, people started noticing him. The trio got booked at big clubs, including the famous ones in Las Vegas.
The first night, we're working at a place called Shep's Playhouse, the opening night.
On stage, people loved them. Even white audiences clapped and cheered for them. But when the show ended, things were different. They weren't allowed to enter the clubs through the front doors. They had to use the back just like all other black performers. This kind of treatment happened everywhere. Even in New York, Davis was turned away from clubs. One time, he and his friends tried to see Frank Sinatra perform at the Copacabana, but they weren't allowed inside. But Sinatra made sure Davis came back the next night and personally walked him in, breaking the club's racist rule.
Black acts couldn't even come in the front door of a hotel. Black acts working in Vegas couldn't stay in the hotel.
His hard work paid off when, in 1951, the Will Maston Trio was invited to perform at Ciro's, a big Hollywood nightclub. They were only supposed to perform for 20 minutes as an opening act, but the crowd loved them so much that they kept performing for almost an hour. The main performer that night, Janice Page, was so impressed that she asked to switch places with them. She would now open for them.
Be famous. And he used to sit back in the dressing room and practice signing his name.
Then we have Sammy on top of the world. People loved him, and he was making a lot of money. His father, Sammy Davis Jr., and his close friend Will Maston were so proud of him. To show their love, they bought him a brand new Cadillac. It wasn't just any car, it had his initials painted on the door. They wanted him to feel special and know that he was loved. But they had no idea that this gift would soon be part of the worst moment of his life.
He was driving down the road and two women coming in the other direction rammed into him.
He loved to party, gamble, and enjoy life. The night before a big recording session in Los Angeles, he was in Las Vegas, performing and having fun. The next morning, he got into his new Cadillac and started driving back to Los Angeles. He felt great. He was young, rich, and successful. He had no idea that his life was about to change forever. As Sammy was driving, a woman pulled her car into his lane. She was trying to make a U-turn, but there wasn't enough time for Sammy to stop or move out of the way. His car crashed into hers, and in just 1 second, everything changed.
I mean, he fell and hit the post and knocked his eye out.
The loud sound of metal crashing filled the air. The force of the crash was so strong that it threw Sammy forward into the steering wheel. His car was completely destroyed, but that was not the worst part. The first thing Sammy thought about after the crash was his assistant, Charlie, who had been in the car with him. Sammy managed to get out of the car and stumbled over to Charlie. What he saw was horrifying. Charlie's jaw was badly dislocated and blood was running down his face. He looked like he was in terrible pain, but when Charlie saw Sammy, his reaction was even more shocking. His left eye was hanging out of its socket, attached by only a thin piece of tissue. The pain was unbelievable. Sammy was in shock. He didn't know what to do. Without thinking, he tried to push his eye back into place with his hand, but it was useless. The damage was too serious.
He gets out of the car and he has his eye in his hand. And he wakes up in a hospital and his eyes are both covered.
But Sammy was not the kind of person to give up. Even with one eye, he was determined to continue his career. Many people thought his career was over, but Sammy refused to let the accident stop him. He worked hard to adjust. He learned how to balance, how to move, and how to perform with only one eye. It was difficult, but he never gave up. Only a few weeks after the accident, Sammy was back on stage. His first performance after the crash was at Ciro's, a famous nightclub in Hollywood. He didn't expect a big crowd. He thought people might have forgotten about him. But when he walked on stage, he saw that half of Hollywood had come to support him. People cheered, clapped, and showed him so much love. In that moment, Sammy knew that he still belonged in show business. He later said, "I never felt so much like I belonged in show business. Everything I had gained from it, like money, was nothing compared to the love I felt from everyone. After his comeback, Sammy became even more famous. His talent was undeniable. Even his father and Will Maston, who had guided him for years, realized that Sammy was now the biggest star in their group. By the late 1950s, Sammy was at the top of his game. He was earning $25,000 a week, performing for huge crowds. He had proven that nothing, not even losing an eye, could stop him.
Say you're in love, in love.
Now, everything changed for him because of his personal life. Sammy Davis Jr. married May Britt, a white actress from Sweden. This was a big deal because, at the time, many people in the United States were against interracial marriage. Even though it was legal in California, where they got married, many states still had laws against it. A lot of people, especially in the South, did not like seeing a black man married to a white woman. Davis and Britt received many death threats. Some people refused to watch his shows, and some theaters did not want to book him anymore. He lost fans, and many in Hollywood started to turn their backs on him. Davis had been a strong supporter of John F. Kennedy when he was running for president. He and the other Rat Pack members worked hard to help Kennedy win. But just 3 days before the event, Davis received bad news. He was told that he and his wife were no longer invited. Kennedy's team decided to remove them from the guest list because they did not want to upset Southern politicians and voters. Davis was heartbroken. He had worked so hard to help Kennedy win, and now he was being pushed aside because of his race and marriage. The pain did not stop there. In 1963, Davis and Britt were invited to a White House event for black leaders. But when Kennedy saw them, he was not happy. He reportedly told his staff to get them out of there so they would not be seen by photographers. This was another deep insult to Davis. He had always admired Kennedy, but now he felt betrayed.
The first night, we were working at a place called Shep's Playhouse, the opening night.
One night in Miami, Sammy was in a hotel with his wife, Britt, and some friends. Martin Luther King Jr. came to visit him. During their talk, someone asked Martin where America stood when it came to race. Before Martin could answer, Sammy spoke up. He told them that even though he was staying in the best hotel suite, he still couldn't walk down the street with his white wife without people judging him. Martin then shared a quote from an old slave preacher. It was about how things were not perfect, but they were better than before and they would keep improving. This moment showed the kind of struggles Sammy faced as a black man in America, even though he was rich and famous. Sammy got involved with something even more surprising, the Church of Satan. Yes, the Church of Satan. It had been founded in California in 1966, and somehow Sammy became interested in it. Even though he had already converted to Judaism, he felt a connection to this group. Some say he got introduced to it through the wild parties he attended. The Church of Satan was known for hosting crazy events, and Sammy seemed to fit right in. As the party went on, Sammy was drinking and using drugs, enjoying the night. Then, something strange happened. One of the people at the party lifted his hood to reveal his face. It was Jay Sebring, Sammy's personal hairstylist. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it's because Jay Sebring was later connected to a very tragic event. He was engaged to Sharon Tate, the actress who was murdered by the Manson family. That night at the party, Sammy had no idea that Jay Sebring would soon become famous, not for his work, but for the horrible way he was killed. Even after that, Sammy stayed connected to the Church of Satan for a while. He would sometimes paint one fingernail black as a way of showing he was part of the group. He also made sure to save seats at his shows for members of the church. They even made him an honorary warlock, which was a special title in their group. It was a strange time in Sammy's life, but he seemed to enjoy it. But things didn't stay good for long. At some point, Sammy's choices started to catch up with him. He also made a decision that many people did not understand. He supported Richard Nixon. Nixon was a president who was not known for helping black people, so when Sammy stood by him, many in the black community turned against him. They felt like he had betrayed them. Some even called him a joke. It was a sad fall from grace for someone who had once been so loved. Eventually, Sammy stopped using drugs, but alcohol was still a big problem for him. He drank so much that doctors told him his liver was failing. They warned him that if he had even one more drink, he would die. This was a wake-up call for Sammy. He loved life too much to throw it all away. So, he made a decision. He quit drinking completely. He still smoked, but he never touched alcohol again. After that, Sammy tried to turn his life around. He focused on his health and even found a new hobby, cooking. Believe it or not, he became a fantastic cook. Even Bill Cosby, who was a big star at the time, talked about how great Sammy's cooking was. It was a surprising talent, but it showed that Sammy still had the ability to learn and grow.
I didn't meet my mother until I was something like 12 years old for the first time.
Success came at a price. His career kept him busy all the time, leaving little room for his own children. He loved them, but he was often away, either performing or attending events. This created distance between him and his kids. They wanted their father around, but he was rarely home. As he got older, Sammy regretted not spending more time with them. He wished he had balanced his career and family life better. Sammy also faced criticism for his lifestyle. He was known for enjoying parties, nightlife, and open relationships. People judged him because he did not live a traditional life. Some believed he was too wild, while others thought he was irresponsible. No matter how talented he was, his personal choices often made headlines. Many people focused on his lifestyle instead of his music and performances. This made things difficult for him because he wanted to be respected for his work, not his private life. But in the entertainment world, personal life often becomes public, and Sammy had to deal with constant judgment. Another topic that followed him throughout his life was his sexuality. Sammy was married to women, but some people who knew him said he also had relationships with men. His biographer, Paul Anka, said that Sammy was open about these experiences with close friends. In an interview, Sammy admitted that a film about a gay relationship affected him deeply. He struggled with his feelings because, in his time, being openly bisexual was not accepted. He had an image as a ladies' man, and he believed this image could not match a bisexual identity. He likely felt pressure to hide parts of himself to protect his career and reputation. Sammy also faced deep struggles with depression. The pressure of being a famous performer was hard to handle. He had to keep smiling and entertaining people, even when he felt sad inside. Being one of the few black entertainers in Hollywood at the time, he also faced racism. No matter how successful he became, there were still people who judged him for the color of his skin. This made him feel alone and unaccepted at times. Outside of his career, he was always involved in shocking and surprising events. One of the craziest stories happened when he invited about 40 of his Hollywood friends to a private movie screening. Everyone was expected to watch a normal film, but when the movie started, they were shocked. The film was Deep Throat, a very famous adult movie from the 1970s. Many of the guests felt uncomfortable and embarrassed, but Sammy seemed to enjoy their reaction. He laughed and had fun, not caring what others thought. He liked to surprise people, and this was just one of his ways of doing it. Sammy's connection to Deep Throat didn't stop there. He actually became friends with Linda Lovelace, the star of the movie. Their friendship became wild and they spent a lot of time together. Sammy was known for living on the edge, and he even convinced his wife to join in on some of his outrageous activities with Linda. Many people in Hollywood whispered about Sammy's private life, but he didn't care. He did what he wanted and enjoyed himself no matter what others thought.
When I walked to the bedside, I bent over and gave him a kiss.
His personal life didn't just affect his friends, it also caused problems with his family. He had an adopted son named Mark, and he wanted to spend more time with him. To do this, Sammy hired Mark as his assistant. This gave them a chance to work together and be closer, but their relationship wasn't always good. They had a big argument over a Vegas dancer. Mark had started dating her, but Sammy, who was already 72 years old, also wanted her for himself. When Sammy couldn't have her, he got so angry that he stopped talking to Mark for 8 months. Their relationship became cold, and it seemed like they might never be close again. Eventually they reconnected, but not for a happy reason. Sammy was dying, and he had something important to tell Mark. Lying on his deathbed, he called Mark to his side and said, "You are my son." This was not a surprise because Mark already knew he was adopted. But then, Sammy said something shocking. Mark was not just his adopted son, but his real biological son. Sammy had kept this secret for many years. He probably did it because he had been unfaithful to his wife, May Britt, and didn't want the truth to come out. But now, at the end of his life, he decided it was time to tell the truth. Mark was confused and wanted proof. He searched for his birth certificate, and when he found it, it listed Sammy Davis Jr. as his father. But when he looked at the section for his mother, it named May Britt. However, Britt was not Mark's real mother. When Mark asked her if she had given birth to him, she firmly said, "No." Many people believe that Mark was born from an affair that Sammy had with another white woman, but no one knows for sure. The identity of Mark's real mother remains a mystery.
I do not believe for 1 minute that my father is Mark's biological father.
You don't believe that?
No, I do not.
Sammy lived a fast-paced life full of excitement, but his bad habits caught up with him. He had been a heavy smoker for years, and this led to throat cancer. Doctors told him that he needed surgery, but if he had the surgery, he would never be able to sing again. For Sammy, singing was everything. He could not imagine living without his voice. So he made a heartbreaking decision. He refused the surgery. He knew this meant he would die soon, but he chose to live his last days without losing what he loved most. In May 1990, Sammy Davis Jr. passed away. But even after his death, his troubles were not over. The very next day, the IRS came to collect millions of dollars in unpaid taxes. His wife, Altavice Gore, was left with huge debts. She had no choice but to sell most of his possessions just to pay the bills. In the end, she was left with almost nothing. Life after Sammy's death was very hard for her. She moved into a small, rundown apartment and struggled to survive. She never got back the glamorous life she once had. Sadly, in 2009, she suffered a stroke and passed away. Sammy Davis Jr. lived a life full of fame, fortune, and wild moments. But behind the bright lights, there were many secrets, struggles, and pain. He will always be remembered as a great entertainer, but his personal life was just as dramatic as the movies he starred in.